The call came at 2:11 a.m., slicing through the quiet of Ethan Miller's apartment like a blade. He had been awake. He was often awake at that hour, staring at the soft glow of his laptop, reviewing code he no longer cared about. Sleep had not come easily for him in years, not since the night Claire left. His phone vibrated across the kitchen counter. Mark Donovan, a name from another life. Ethan hesitated, his pulse kicking hard against his ribs. Mark hadn't called in nearly 3 years, not since the divorce shattered everything between their families. For a moment he considered letting it ring, but something in his gut, something old, familiar, unwelcome, made him swipe the screen. Ethan? Mark's voice was tight, frantic, stripped of its usual confidence. You need to come to Harborview, now. Ethan stood up so quickly his chair scraped the floor. Mark? What happened? It's Claire. The world around him stilled, the refrigerator hum fading, the rain brushing against the window dissolving into nothing. Mark swallowed on the line. She was in an accident. A pileup on I-5. She was coming off a double shift. She asked for you. Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. What do you mean she asked for me? We haven't... His voice cracked before he could stop it. I know, Mark whispered, but before she lost consciousness, she kept saying your name, over and over. A tremor ran through Ethan's fingers. For 3 years he had built walls, brick by brick, around the version of Claire he once loved. The soft-spoken medical student with laugh lines around her eyes. But the Claire who left him had been cold, ambitious, unreachable. She had ended their marriage with a precision that felt surgical. And now she wanted him? Is she alive? Ethan asked, barely audible. For now, Mark said. Please, just get here. Ethan didn't remember the drive across Seattle, only the rain flashing beneath streetlights, the wipers struggling against the storm, and the growing dread that pulsed in his chest with every passing mile. When he reached Harborview Medical Center, the fluorescent lobby lights felt too harsh, too sterile, too familiar. He had waited here once before, the night Claire finished her final residency exam and told him she needed space. He never realized space meant a divorce envelope delivered the next morning. Mark was pacing near the ICU doors, eyes red, scrubs stained with someone's blood. Claire's, Ethan realized with a jolt. She's still in surgery, Mark said before Ethan could speak. Ethan, it's bad. Ethan nodded numbly. For a long moment they stood in the corridor, 2 men connected only by the same woman and the same fear. Ethan studied Mark's face, the guilt, the panic, the exhaustion, and realized something else. Mark wasn't just scared. He was hiding something. What aren't you telling me? Ethan asked quietly. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then rubbed his hands over his face. Claire hasn't been okay for a long time. Ethan stilled. What does that mean? Mark hesitated. She pushed everyone away after the divorce, worked nonstop, barely slept, and there were rumors, he swallowed, about her and Dr. Keaton, her supervising surgeon. Ethan felt a coldness crawl up his spine. Claire had once told him that Keaton believed in her potential. He hadn't realized how much potential the man seemed to see. Rumors, Ethan repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. Not just that, Mark continued, lowering his voice. She changed, Ethan. Really changed. I tried to talk to her last month. She broke down in the parking lot. Said she ruined everything good in her life. She said He stopped, emotion rising in his throat. Ethan's fists tightened. She said, what? Mark met his eyes. That leaving you was the biggest mistake she ever made. Ethan felt the words hit him like a blow. For a moment he couldn't breathe. He had imagined Claire saying something like that so many nights, in fantasies and dreams, in moments of unbearable loneliness. But hearing it now, here, in the sterile corridor of the ICU, felt wrong, thin. too late. Before he could respond, the ICU doors swung open. A surgeon stepped out, blood-spattered gown, trembling hands, exhaustion etched deep into his features. "Family of Dr. Claire Donovan?" Ethan and Mark both stepped forward. "She made it through surgery," the surgeon said carefully, "but she's not stable. She may regain consciousness briefly, or she may not." Ethan felt something inside him fracturing. The surgeon continued. "She kept repeating the same thing on the way to the OR. She asked for Ethan, over and over." Mark's eyes slid toward him, heavy with meaning. "That's why I called you." Ethan leaned against the wall, air burning in his lungs. The storm outside rattled the windows, as if echoing the storm inside his chest. He had spent 3 years trying to forget the sound of Claire's voice. But now, she was calling for him again, from a place between life and death. And Ethan felt the truth he had buried rise violently to the surface. He had never stopped loving her. The hallway outside the ICU smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked clothing. Ethan sat in one of the plastic chairs, elbows on his knees, head bowed as if holding himself together required physical effort. Mark had stepped away to make calls, leaving Ethan suspended in a silence that felt heavier than the midnight storm outside. Every few seconds, the ICU doors hissed open or closed, and each time Ethan's shoulders tensed, expecting someone to call his name, hoping and dreading in the same breath. 3 years. 3 years since the divorce papers. 3 years since Claire's last words to him. "I need a life that challenges me, Ethan. You don't understand." Ambition. He had replayed that moment so many times he'd memorized the shadows on her face. A soft voice broke through the quiet. "Mr. Miller?" He looked up. A nurse with tired eyes and a clipboard stood beside him. "She's stable enough for a short visit," the nurse said. "Just a few minutes." Ethan rose, his heartbeat hammering, unsure if he wanted to walk through those doors or run from them. Inside the ICU, the lighting was dim, machines blinking with indifferent rhythm. Claire lay motionless on the bed, her skin pale against the dark bruises along her jaw. Tubes, wires, monitors, the stark contrast to the woman he once knew, full of restless energy, chasing everything she believed he couldn't give her. Seeing her like this made something inside him fold and crack. He stepped closer. "Claire," he whispered, though he didn't expect an answer. For a long moment, nothing moved, except the slow rise of her chest under the blanket. But then her fingers twitched, barely perceptible. Ethan froze. "Claire?" His voice tightened. Her eyelids fluttered open halfway. They were unfocused at first, drifting as if trying to anchor to the room. Then they found him. Her breathing hitched, and a faint sound escaped her lips. "Ethan?" The way she said his name, like it hurt, like she needed it, hit him harder than the crash ever could. "I'm here," he said, though his voice was barely steady. Tears welled in her eyes. She tried to lift her hand, but it trembled uselessly in the air. He gently took it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, each word fragile, slipping out like a confession too heavy to contain. "Don't," Ethan murmured instinctively, though he didn't know whether he meant "don't apologize" or "don't break me again." Her lips trembled. "I didn't know who else to call." "You didn't call me," Ethan said softly. "Mark did." Claire's eyes closed, pain tightening her face. Not physical pain, something deeper. "I tried," she whispered. "I wanted to so many times. I just didn't know if I had the right anymore." Ethan swallowed. "You didn't need to earn a right." She opened her eyes again, and for a moment he saw the woman he married, the girl who once studied anatomy flashcards at their kitchen table, hair in a messy bun, wearing his hoodie. The girl who used to fall asleep on his shoulder during late-night bus rides home. "I messed everything up," she breathed. "Ethan, I ruined us." He didn't know how to answer. His throat tightened around all the things he never said. The betrayal he swallowed, the shame he carried, the nights he wished she'd come back, and the nights he prayed she wouldn't. Before he could speak, Claire's heart monitor beeped sharply. She gasped, eyes widening in panic. "Stay," she said, voice cracking. "Please, don't leave me again." Again. The word landed like a stone in his chest. "I'm not going
Anywhere,
Ethan said, squeezing her hand. A nurse hurried over, checking the monitor. "We need to give her something for pain," she said gently. "She can only talk for a moment more." Claire looked at Ethan with a desperation that made his breath catch. "I wasn't happy without you," she said. "I pretended I was. I thought ambition would fill the emptiness, but it only broke me more." Ethan's vision blurred. Claire. But before he could finish, her eyes rolled slightly, and the sedative the nurse administered pulled her under again. Her hand slipped from his. Ethan exhaled shakily, standing alone beside the bed, his heart full of emotions he couldn't sort. Grief, anger, longing, resentment, tenderness, all tangled too tightly to separate. He remained there until the machines returned to their steady rhythm. Only then did he step away. Outside the room, Mark stood waiting, eyes heavy. Did she wake? Ethan nodded. For a moment. And did she say anything? Ethan hesitated. Claire's voice still echoed inside him. "I wasn't happy without you. I ruined us. Stay." She was confused. Ethan lied gently. "In pain, not really coherent." Mark inhaled, shoulders slumping. "I figured." They walked together down the dim corridor. Rain streaked the windows, Seattle drowning in a quiet storm. "Ethan," Mark said suddenly, stopping him, "there's something you should know. Claire wasn't herself these last few months. She was paranoid, nervous. She thought someone was watching her." Ethan frowned. "Watching her? Who?" Mark looked away. "I don't know. But she kept mentioning Dr. Keaton. Said she made a mistake trusting him." Something cold settled in Ethan's stomach. What kind of mistake? Mark shook his head. "I wish I knew, but she told me she regretted everything, especially the divorce." The weight of those words pressed into Ethan's chest until it hurt to breathe. Mark rested a hand on his shoulder. "Whatever happened between you two, she needs you now. More than anyone." Ethan didn't answer immediately. In truth, he didn't know what he was supposed to feel, or what he was allowed to feel. But as he looked back toward Claire's room, he realized something terrifying. He had spent 3 years trying to let her go, and all it took was a whisper of his name to undo every mile he had put between them. He wasn't sure if that was love, or simply the wound reopening. But he knew one thing with painful clarity. Nothing about this night was over. Morning crept into Seattle quietly, a thin silver light smudging across the hospital windows. Ethan hadn't slept, not even a minute. He sat in the dim family waiting room, a paper cup of cold coffee untouched in his hands, his mind replaying every word Claire managed to whisper before the sedatives took her under. "Stay. I wasn't happy without you. I ruined us." Words that felt like they were pulled from the ruins of their past. The automatic doors hissed open. Mark stepped in, now in fresh clothes, but his face looked even more tired than before. He had a small cardboard box in his hands. "They gave me her things, Fra," Mark said quietly. "From the crash." Ethan straightened. "Is that?" Mark set the box on the table. "Yeah, wallet, ID badge, broken phone, and this." He pulled out a small black notebook. Soft leather, worn edges, the kind people used when they had things they didn't want on screens. Things too personal to risk in a cloud backup. Claire never used notebooks. She lived on digital calendars, task lists, spreadsheets. The notebook felt Strange. Private. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. I haven't looked inside. Didn't feel right. Ethan reached for it, then stopped, fingers hovering above the cover. You think this is something she'd want us to read? Mark sighed. Ethan. Claire's life the last year hasn't made sense. Whatever she was involved in, emotionally, professionally, it wasn't healthy. If that notebook explains even a part of it, he paused. We need to know. Ethan looked down at the notebook again. The leather was scratched, as if Claire had been carrying it everywhere, as if she clutched it. He opened it. The first page was blank, just a faint indentation where she had pressed the pen too hard. He flipped to the next. A date. March 18th. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Sharp, curved, precise. I don't recognize myself anymore. I feel like I'm living someone else's life. One built on expectations I never agreed to. I keep telling myself I earned this. I worked for this. But why does every achievement feel like another step away from who I used to be? Ethan's breath tightened. He turned the page. April 2nd. Dr. Keaton says I'm special. I shouldn't like hearing it, but I do. I hate that I do. Ethan would tell me to be careful. He always saw through people better than I did. But I didn't want to hear his voice in my head. Not then. Not when I wanted to feel chosen. Mark exhaled sharply. Jesus. Ethan kept reading. April 25th. The night with Keaton shouldn't have happened. He made it seem harmless, like it was normal for mentors and residents to release stress together. He said he understood the pressure I was under. He said Ethan would never understand my ambition. I believed him. God, I let myself believe him. Ethan's grip tightened on the notebook until the leather creaked. He turned another page. May 7th. I ended things with him. Or I tried to. He didn't take it well. Said I owed him. Said he made me. I didn't know what he meant until today. My schedule changed, without explanation. 4 double shifts in a row. Charts piled on my desk. Rumors spreading. Someone is punishing me. I think it's him. Mark's jaw clenched. She should have told someone. Filed a report. She couldn't, Ethan murmured, eyes still on the page. Residents don't survive scandals. They barely survive existing. He turned the page. June 19th. I saw Ethan today, from across the street. He looks different. Stronger, quieter, happier. I wanted to run to him. I didn't. I'm not that person anymore, and I don't deserve to disrupt his life again. Ethan stared at that line until the letters blurred. Mark sat down heavily beside him. She still cared, man. I know, Ethan whispered, though the words hurt. Another entry. July 3rd. The hospital feels dangerous. I feel watched. Keaton cornered me after surgery. Told me he'd bury me if I spoke to HR. I believed him. God help me, I'm scared. I can't sleep. I can't think. Sometimes I wonder if leaving Ethan was the first domino that toppled everything else. I traded the one person who loved me for this. Ethan closed the notebook abruptly, breath catching in his throat. Mark rubbed his temples. This isn't just heartbreak, Ethan. She was in real trouble. Ethan nodded slowly. And she was alone. The thought struck him like a punch. Claire, who always wanted more, who always chased brightness, had been drowning silently while the world admired her white coat. Mark leaned back, looking at the ceiling. Keaton's still here, you know. He's on the surgical floor today. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't give a damn where he is. Mark looked at him carefully. Ethan, don't do anything stupid. Stupid? Ethan's voice was low, controlled. Stupid is what happens when a man still has something to lose. I don't. Mark held his gaze for a moment, then exhaled. At least wait until we know Claire's stable. Ethan didn't answer. He wasn't sure he trusted himself to. Instead, he opened the notebook again, flipping to the most recent entry. September 28th. The night before the accident, I drove past Ethan's apartment tonight. I didn't mean to. I just ended up there. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the light under his door. I wanted to knock. I wanted to explain everything. But what would I even say? That I broke us for ambition? That I let someone manipulate me? That I'm terrified? Maybe tomorrow I'll tell him the truth. Ethan closed the notebook slowly. Tomorrow never came. He looked up at Mark, voice raw. She was coming to see me. Mark nodded. Yeah, I think she was. Ethan turned toward the hallway leading back to Claire's ICU room. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. Everything he thought he knew about the past 3 years had just shifted. And beneath the broken pieces, a new truth was emerging. Claire hadn't left him because he wasn't enough. Claire left because she was falling apart and didn't know how to let him see her break. And now, whether Ethan wanted it or not, he was already pulled back into the gravity of her life. Ethan didn't go back to Claire's room immediately. He needed air. Real air, not the recycled metallic hospital kind. So he stepped into the narrow outdoor smoking area behind the ER. No one smoked there at this hour, but the cold morning wind helped keep his thoughts from spiraling too fast. He leaned against the concrete wall, the notebook still in his hand, its weight unnatural, too heavy for something so small. Every sentence inside it felt like a bruise pressed directly against his chest. Claire's handwriting, Claire's fear, Claire's regret. He had spent years imagining what she felt after walking away from him. Anger, relief, freedom, indifference. But not this. Never this. A door opened behind him. Footsteps. Slow, purposeful. Ethan turned. A man in hospital scrubs stepped outside, pulling off his gloves with a casual arrogance that was unmistakable even from a distance. Tall, mid-40s, sharply cut features, dark hair streaked with deliberate gray. Everything about him radiated confidence, polished by years of authority. Dr. Nathan Keaton. Ethan recognized him immediately. Claire had mentioned him years ago in passing. Her brilliant attending, the one who pushed her harder than anyone else. She had admired him then. Ethan remembered the flicker of hunger in her eyes when she talked about Keaton's skill, his intensity, his expectations. But the man standing here wasn't a mentor. He was the shadow in Claire's notebook. Keaton spotted Ethan and paused, eyes narrowing with cold curiosity. "You must be Miller," he said, as if identifying a specimen. "I've been told you're here." Ethan stiffened, instinctively folding the notebook behind his back. Keaton stepped closer, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, but his eyes held a predatory sharpness. "I assume you came because of Claire," he said. "Unfortunate situation." Unfortunate. That word sent heat rising in Ethan's chest. "She almost died," Ethan said flatly. Keaton shrugged. "We lose people every day. It's part of the job." "She isn't people," Ethan snapped. "She's Claire." Keaton tilted his head. "She was also my resident." Ethan caught the past tense. "Was?" he repeated. Keaton's jaw twitched. Subtle, but there. Administration was preparing to release her. Her performance had declined. The lie pulsed like a red siren. Ethan kept his voice low. "You sabotaged her." Keaton's brows lifted, amused. "Is that what she told you?" "Not in words," Ethan said. He tapped the notebook. "But clearly enough." The amusement vanished from Keaton's eyes, replaced by something colder. "Be careful what you think you know, Mr. Miller." Ethan stepped closer. "No," he said quietly. "You be careful." For a breathless second, the air tightened between them. Then Keaton let out a small, dismissive laugh. She always needed someone to blame. First you, then the system, then me. Claire was talented, very talented, but fragile. He leaned in slightly. Some people aren't built for the pressure. Ethan's pulse surged with anger he hadn't felt since the divorce. But this wasn't the anger of heartbreak. It was the anger of clarity. She wasn't fragile, Ethan said. She was exhausted and scared. Keaton's gaze sharpened. Scared? Of what? You, Ethan said, voice steady. Your control, your threats. Something shifted in Keaton's eyes, the faintest crack, quickly plastered over with arrogance. She should have been grateful, Keaton said. I saw potential in her. She needed direction. Direction doesn't involve coercion. Keaton's smile hardened. You really think she told you the truth? She's been unstable for months. Ethan felt the words cut through him, sharp and practiced. This was a man used to gaslighting, to rewriting narratives, to making sure no one questioned him. If she was unstable, Ethan said slowly, it's because you pushed her until she broke. Keaton scoffed. Please. Claire sought me out. She knew what she wanted. Ethan's stomach twisted at the cruelty beneath the statement. Keaton continued. When she realized she couldn't keep up, she panicked. She wanted out. But you can't undo choices just because they hurt. Ethan steadied his breath. Claire's notebook had painted a painful picture, but hearing Keaton's words filled in the missing colors, the manipulation, the condescension, the control disguised as mentorship. Stay away from her, Ethan said, dropping the last of his restraint. Keaton smirked. Or what? You'll protect her? She divorced you, remember? The words landed like a punch, but they didn't knock Ethan down the way they once would have. She needed help, Ethan said, and you gave her the opposite. Keaton's smile faded. She's lucky to be alive, he said, but if you think her problem started with me, you're deluding yourself. Claire was already trying to outrun her own choices long before she ever stepped into my OR. And with that, he pushed open the door and walked back inside, leaving the cold air swirling behind him. Ethan stood there alone, chest tight, adrenaline buzzing through his veins. Keaton was wrong about one thing. Claire hadn't been outrunning her choices. She had been running from the consequences of one choice, leaving Ethan. And now Ethan understood something he hadn't allowed himself to admit. Claire hadn't needed ambition. She hadn't needed admiration. She had needed safety, and she had trusted the wrong person to give it to her. He walked back inside, toward the ICU, toward the woman who had broken him, and whom he had never stopped protecting, even when he wasn't around to see her fall apart. Ethan spent the rest of the morning pacing the hospital corridors, the black notebook pressed tightly under his arm. Every word he had, read seemed to weigh a ton, and the memory of Keaton's cold arrogance burned under his skin. Claire had endured months of manipulation, exhaustion, and fear alone, and he hadn't even known the full extent. 3 years of silence had not just been her punishment. It had been a punishment for them both. He found Mark sitting silently in a corner of the family lounge, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm coffee cup. The younger man looked up when Ethan approached, eyes haunted. She woke again, Mark said quietly. Just for a moment, like last night. Said your name. Ethan nodded, staring at the floor. I know. Mark's gaze lingered. Do you want to see her? Ethan hesitated. 3 years of anger, betrayal, and grief coiled inside him. But beneath that, a deeper current ran, a tether he couldn't ignore. Claire was alive. She was here, and she had reached for him. Yes, he said finally. The ICU was quieter than the night before, the blinking monitors a rhythmic, almost hypnotic accompaniment to the sterile hum of machines. Claire lay motionless, her chest rising and falling with fragile precision. Ethan approached slowly, his eyes tracing every scar, every bruise, every tiny bandage like a map of her suffering. He didn't touch her at first. He just watched. The woman he had married, the woman he still loved, looked so vulnerable it made his heart ache. "Claire," he whispered, kneeling beside her bed. Her eyes flickered open. The moment she saw him, panic rippled across her face, then softened into something raw and pleading. "Ethan," she breathed, voice trembling. I'm so sorry." "Shh," he murmured, taking her hand gently. "Don't apologize. Just be here." Her fingers curled around his, weakly but insistently. Ethan could feel the trembling pulse beneath her skin. The fragility of her body contrasted sharply with the fire of her words from the notebook. "You shouldn't have come back for me," she whispered, tears brimming. "You had your life, your happiness." Ethan shook his head. "My life? It's meaningless without you." The words came out harsher than he expected, but they were true. Every night for 3 years had been empty, every accomplishment hollow, every laugh incomplete. Claire leaving him had been a wound, but hearing how much she had suffered because of someone else's cruelty, someone like Keaton, ignited a different kind of anger inside him. Protective, fierce, immovable. Claire's lips trembled. "I didn't know how to ask for help. I was so scared. I thought I could handle it." "You weren't supposed to handle it alone," Ethan said. The notebook weighed on his mind like a confession in ink. "And you shouldn't have had to. None of this was your fault." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in months, Ethan saw the full depth of her remorse. Not just for leaving him, but for letting herself be hurt, for allowing someone to manipulate her, for walking away from the one person who had always loved her unconditionally. I left because I thought it was the right choice," she whispered, voice breaking. "I thought ambition would make me stronger. But all it did was break me and hurt you." Ethan's chest tightened. He leaned closer, voice low but firm. "Claire, you're alive. You're here, and that's enough for now. We'll deal with everything else later." A weak smile flickered on her lips. "Everything else? Like?" "Like the man who thought he could control you," Ethan said, teeth clenched. "Like the lies, the manipulation, the months you spent scared and alone, and maybe even like the 3 years we've lost." Her hand tightened around his. "Do you forgive me?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Ethan exhaled slowly. Forgiveness wasn't simple. Not for him, not for what she had endured, and what they had both lost. But in that moment, standing in the dim morning light of the ICU, he realized something. Holding on to anger would accomplish nothing. She had suffered enough. "I don't know if I can forgive everything yet," he admitted, "but I'm here now. That counts for something." Tears streamed down her face, unashamed, unrestrained. I wanted to tell you everything," she said. "I was going to. I thought I'd have the courage, but I didn't." "You have it now," Ethan said, "and we'll take it one step at a time, together." For the first time in 3 years, the air between them didn't carry resentment or pain, only the fragile, trembling possibility of something else, something unspoken, something they could rebuild. As Claire drifted back under sedation, Ethan remained beside her, notebook clutched loosely in one hand. The words she had written, the fears she had endured, the regrets she had carried alone, they were no longer just ink on paper. They were a bridge to the woman he had loved, a bridge to understanding, a bridge to the future, however uncertain, however fragile, however painfully beautiful it might be. Outside the ICU, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. The world seemed quieter, softer, almost as if it were holding its breath with him. Ethan stood there for a long moment, knowing that the coming days would be complicated, messy, full of difficult conversations and truths that could hurt as much as they healed. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. And that small glimmer of truth, that Claire had been reaching for him, that she had trusted him even when she thought she couldn't, was enough to ignite something he had thought lost forever. Ethan left the ICU for the first time that morning, taking the elevator down to the hospital's underground parking garage. The air was damp, smelling faintly of rain and asphalt, a stark contrast to the sterile cold of the hospital. He needed to think, to breathe, to process the avalanche of revelations from the notebook and the brief, fragile moments he had shared with Claire. Mark trailed behind him silently. Neither spoke until the distant sound of cars echoing off concrete walls filled the space. "Ethan," Mark began cautiously, "there's more. You need to know before she wakes fully." Ethan stopped, fists tightening around the notebook. "What is it?" Mark hesitated, eyes flicking toward the shadows at the edge of the garage. Keaton wasn't just manipulative. He was dangerous. Not physically, but professionally. Claire, she confided in me a month before the accident. Someone was sabotaging her schedules, falsifying patient charts, making her look incompetent. Ethan's jaw clenched. "How do you know it was him?" Mark swallowed. She didn't have proof. Not yet. But she feared him. Every email, every meeting. She was afraid to speak up. She thought if she tried to fight, he could destroy her career. And maybe he nearly did, indirectly. The words settled like lead in Ethan's chest. 3 years ago, he had believed Claire left him for ambition. Now he realized she had been trapped, terrified, struggling against a man she could not confront openly. And in the process, she had lost herself. And temporarily, him. Ethan's fingers brushed the notebook. "She tried to protect me from her pain. She didn't leave me because she didn't love me. She left me to survive." Mark shifted nervously. She almost told you herself. She wrote about confronting him, about finally standing up, but she didn't send it. Maybe she was going to before the accident. Ethan felt a mixture of anger and helplessness surge through him. Claire had suffered in silence, beaten not just by circumstance, but by someone who should have been her mentor, and he had been blind to it. "You think this is why the accident happened?" Ethan asked, voice low, almost bitter. "Stress, exhaustion, pushing herself too hard?" Mark nodded. "She's human, Ethan, and humans break when pushed too far." The garage fell silent, save for the distant hum of city traffic above. Rain streaked the concrete windows, turning the night into a cascade of light and shadow. Ethan thought of Claire lying in the ICU, fragile, scared, yet still fighting. She was stronger than she realized, and yet vulnerable in ways she had never let anyone see. "I need to see her again," Ethan said finally. His voice had a quiet intensity, unyielding. "She's the only one who can tell me herself. I need the truth, all of it." Mark hesitated. "Are you sure? Some of it, it's not easy. She's fragile right now." Ethan shook his head. "Fragile isn't a reason to avoid the truth. It's a reason to be there for her when she's scared." They returned to the ICU together. Claire's vitals were stable, the machines humming like a heartbeat against the quiet room. Her eyes opened slowly as Ethan approached, her gaze searching for him almost instinctively. "Ethan," she whispered. He knelt beside her bed. "Claire, I need you to tell me everything. I need the truth." Her lips trembled. I don't know where to start." "Start wherever you want," he said softly. "I can take it. I need to know what happened." Claire's hand reached for his, holding him with surprising strength. "It was Dr. Keaton. He manipulated me, forced me into situations I didn't want. He threatened me. He made me doubt myself every day. I thought leaving you was my choice, my ambition. But it wasn't. It was survival. I was terrified of losing my career, my future, even my life. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Rage and sorrow mingled inside him. A dangerous mix. And you didn't tell me because I didn't want to worry you, she admitted. I thought maybe I could handle it. Maybe I could do it all alone. But I couldn't. And I almost didn't make it. Ethan squeezed her hand. You did make it, and you have me now. No more alone. No more secrets. Claire's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Ethan, for leaving, for hiding the truth, for everything. Ethan shook his head. Stop apologizing. The past is the past. What matters is now. You, me, and the truth. We can face it together. For a long moment, they held each other's gaze. The room, the machines, the city outside, all faded into the background. For the first time, the years of betrayal, pain, and misunderstanding felt like a bridge rather than a wall. Claire whispered, almost afraid to break the moment, Do you still care for me? Ethan smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. More than I can say, and I'll prove it, one step at a time. The rain outside had slowed to a light drizzle, washing the city clean. For Ethan, the storm inside him had not ended, but a path through it had begun. The secrets in the shadows, Keaton's manipulation, Claire's suffering, the unspoken love between them, were now out in the open. And for the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could survive it all. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every detail of Claire's confession replayed in his mind like a film he couldn't pause. The manipulations, the threats, the relentless pressure that had pushed her to the brink. And at the center of it all was Keaton. Calm, arrogant, untouchable. By early morning, Ethan had made a decision. He needed to see Keaton, to confront him, not just for Claire, but for himself. The notebook lay on the kitchen table of his small apartment, still open, its words a map to every fear and betrayal Claire had endured. Mark drove him to the hospital in silence. The streets of Seattle glistened with rain, reflecting the soft neon of coffee shops and apartment lights. Ethan's thoughts were a storm, each one heavier than the last. He rehearsed what he would say. Tell him what you know. Tell him he's done. Protect Claire. When they arrived, Keaton's office was on the surgical floor. Large windows, glass walls, the kind of office that flaunted authority. Ethan hesitated outside the door, then pushed it open. Keaton looked up from a pile of patient charts, his expression pleasantly surprised, almost amused. Mr. Miller, he said smoothly, I didn't expect to see you here. Ethan's eyes were cold, steady. I'm here for Claire. Keaton smiled, a faint curl of superiority. Claire, she's fortunate. Not many have someone who cares so much. Ethan stepped closer, voice controlled but firm. Care doesn't excuse abuse. Keaton's smile faltered, just slightly. Abuse? That's a strong word for mentorship. Ethan's jaw clenched. Mentorship doesn't threaten, manipulate schedules, falsify charts, and make a woman afraid for her career. Claire trusted you, and you betrayed her. Keaton leaned back in his chair, folding his hands neatly. Betrayal is a matter of perspective. I expected excellence. She wanted approval. She chose to leave you, Mr. Miller. That was her choice. Ethan's eyes narrowed. No. Leaving me was the only way she could survive your manipulation. She wasn't free. She was trapped. And if she hadn't had the accident, Maybe no one would have seen what you did. Keaton's eyes darkened. You have no idea what you're talking about. Claire is talented, brilliant even. She just, faltered under pressure. That's life. Ethan's hands curled into fists. She didn't falter. You broke her, and now it's over. I'm warning you. Stay away from her. If I find out you touch her life in any way again, I won't just report you. You'll regret it. Keaton laughed softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're threatening me? On what grounds? Do you have proof? Ethan opened the notebook and slid it across the desk. Proof. Every page she wrote before the accident. Her fear, your threats, your lies. This is what you did to her. Keaton picked up the notebook, flipping through the pages with a detached curiosity. So this is her version of events, he said, voice smooth but tight. You're assuming she's telling the truth. I'm a professional. She knew that. Ethan leaned over the desk. She doesn't need to justify her truth to you. I don't care if it's professional or personal. You endangered her. You manipulated her. And now you're going to leave her alone. Keaton's face hardened, a flicker of something dangerous appearing behind his calm mask. Do you really think you can protect her? 3 years you were absent, and you never knew. Now you think one confrontation will change anything? Ethan's voice dropped, low, with a weight that left no room for argument. I don't need to change anything. I just need to make sure you don't hurt her again. For a moment, Keaton's eyes searched Ethan's, sharp and calculating. Then, slowly, he put the notebook down. Be careful, Mr. Miller. You don't know what you're stepping into. Ambition is a dangerous thing. So is obsession. Ethan stood, calm but unyielding. I know exactly what I'm stepping into. You stay away from her. Period. Keaton's smirk returned, but it was forced now. We'll see. Ethan left the office with Mark waiting outside, feeling the tension in his shoulders slowly unwind. For the first time, he felt the weight of the past 3 years shift. The confrontation hadn't erased the pain or fear, but it had reclaimed a small piece of power for Claire. And for him. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Ethan's phone buzzed. A message from the ICU. Claire was awake, asking for him. He rushed back, adrenaline mixing with apprehension. Claire's eyes were wide, fragile, and searching, and when she saw him, a small smile tugged at her lips. I did it, Ethan said softly, kneeling beside her. I made sure he knows you're not his to control anymore. Claire's hand found his, squeezing it weakly but firmly. I'm scared, she admitted. Even now. I know, Ethan said, voice steady, but you're not alone. Not anymore. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. For the first time, they didn't speak of the past 3 years, the betrayals, or the pain. They didn't need to. In that moment, the unspoken promise hung between them. Protection, trust, and the fragile hope of rebuilding what had been broken. Outside, the city of Seattle stretched beneath the morning sky, rain-slicked streets glimmering like shards of glass. Inside, the quiet hum of the ICU and the faint beep of monitors marked the rhythm of a life reclaimed. And for Ethan and Claire, the shadows of the past were still there, but they had finally found a way to face them. Together. The days after Keaton's confrontation passed in a blur of quiet vigilance. Claire recovered slowly, each morning bringing new strength, each evening leaving her body exhausted but her mind clearer. For Ethan, every moment beside her was a revelation. How fragile life could be, how easily love could be tested, and how resilient the heart truly was when it refused to surrender. Claire's fingers clung to Ethan's as they walked together through the hospital's narrow corridors. The notebook lay closed on the bedside table, a testament to her pain, but also a symbol of her courage. She had shared everything with him now. The manipulation, the threats, the exhaustion, the mistakes she made in isolation. And he had listened, without judgment, without anger, only with a steady hand and unwavering presence. "Ethan," she whispered one morning, voice still soft from weeks of sedation and weak sleep. "I never realized how much I relied on you. Even after everything, Ethan." Squeezed her hand gently. "I never stopped caring, Claire. You were always the one I wanted to protect." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were different. Not just fear or regret, but relief, and something tentative, fragile, yet undeniable, hope. "You know," she said, her voice catching slightly, "when I left, I thought ambition would fill the emptiness inside me. I thought achieving something, being someone important, would make me complete. But it didn't. Not really. Not without this." She gestured at them, the two of them together. Ethan let the words sink in. He had spent 3 years imagining she had abandoned him for success, for prestige, for the life he couldn't give. Now he understood the truth. She had been running from fear and manipulation, not from love. For the first time, they were both honest, not just about the past, but about the present and the future. Claire's recovery was slow, deliberate. Every day brought small victories. Sitting up in bed, walking down the hall with assistance, even laughing quietly when a nurse made a joke. And Ethan was there, always steady, always patient. He understood that healing wasn't a race. It was a delicate rhythm of trust, care, and time. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into the room, casting warm golden streaks across the floor, Claire reached for Ethan's hand. "I want to try again," she said softly. "Not just survive, but really live together." Ethan's heart clenched with emotion. He searched her eyes, saw the honesty there, the vulnerability, the strength. 3 years of pain, separation, and misunderstanding led to this fragile, tentative promise. "I want that too," he replied. "Every day, if you'll have me." They didn't speak of the divorce or of the anger and hurt that had marked their separation. Those were lessons etched into their hearts, but not chains to hold them back. Instead, they focused on the small moments, quiet conversations, shared coffee in the mornings, walks through the rain-slicked streets of Seattle, the city reflecting their tentative steps toward trust and love renewed. Keaton's shadow had receded. Reports had been filed, investigations quietly launched, and Claire's name restored without scandal. But the memory lingered, not as a source of fear anymore, but as a reminder of the fragility of trust and the importance of presence. One evening, as the city's neon lights shimmered on the wet streets below, Ethan and Claire sat by her hospital window, the notebook closed beside them. "I was so afraid," Claire admitted, voice barely above a whisper, "that I had lost everything, that you had lost me forever." Ethan took her hand in both of his. "You didn't lose me. Even when you were gone, even when I didn't know the whole truth, I kept you. In my heart, in my thoughts. That never changed." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the rhythm of his breathing a steady anchor. "And I should have trusted you sooner," she murmured. "I should have told you everything." "And now you have," Ethan replied softly, "and that's enough. That's the start of everything else." For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to imagine the future, not as separate individuals carrying the weight of betrayal and regret, but as two people who had survived, who had learned, who had chosen to fight for each other again. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to Claire's temple. "We'll take it one day at a time," he whispered. Claire lifted her face, meeting his gaze with a mixture of love, relief, and courage. Together. And in that moment, they both understood. The past could not be undone, but it could be honored, learned from, and ultimately left behind. The wounds were still there, faint scars on hearts that had been tested, but they no longer defined them. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glimmered with the promise of renewal, much like their fragile, tentative hope. And as they sat together, hand in hand, Ethan and Claire finally allowed themselves to believe that love, the kind that endured absence, pain, and fear, could survive anything. They had been broken, bruised, and tested by ambition, manipulation, and betrayal. But in the quiet aftermath, in the tender rhythm of trust restored, they had found each other again. And this time, nothing would tear them apart.